Hi everyone, welcome to Eco Learning Classes. This is Professor Geeta Mahesh. Dear students, next chapter, Theory of Demand and Supply. In this chapter, we will be discussing meaning of demand, law of demand, movement and shifts in demand, exceptions to the law of demand. Let us start discussion on meaning, law of demand and exemptions to the law of demand. Dear students, you may be an entrepreneur or you may be a manager, but you will be in a position to answer so many questions like why do prices changes when there is a weather change or war, pandemic or new discoveries occurs? Why is it so that some producer are able to charge higher price for their product compared to other product? You have to answer these type of questions. Not only this, there will be a thousands of similar or such type of questions. From this chapter, you can find the answers for these type of questions. See, market system is governed by market mechanism. What do you mean by market mechanism? Means determination of price of the product with the help of demand and supply. When demand and supply intersect, you can find out the price and the quantity, equilibrium quantity. What is equilibrium quantity? Quantity brought and sold. So demand is also OQ quantity and supply is also OQ quantity, and you can bring OQ quantity and you can clear at equilibrium price. So this process we call it as market mechanism. What are market forces? Demand and supply, we call it as market forces. We call demand and supply as market forces. And this market forces make market economies work. These two together determines the price and quantity of a commodity or services can be sold. Dear students, now let us discuss meaning of demand. If you ask a common layman, he may say demand means desire for a commodity. But in economics, we cannot consider just a desire for a commodity as a demand. Economics or business decision makers will consider effective demand as a demand. In economics, demand refers to few things, or you have to consider few things. Now let us discuss what is demand. Here demand refers to quantity of a commodity or service that a buyer are willing and able to purchase at a various prices during a given period of time. Given period of time, time is very important, and at a various prices, that means at a different level of price, how a consumer behaves, that is also important. And consumer should be willing to buy a product and able to buy. Able to buy means you should have a sufficient income or purchasing power to buy that particular commodity. So to consider it as an effective demand, it depends on few things. You can consider desire for a commodity, and you should have a sufficient purchasing power along with the desire, and you should be willing to use your purchasing power for purchasing that particular commodity. Unless desire is backed by purchasing power or ability to pay and willingness to pay, it does not constitute demand. Effective demand would be figure in economic analysis and business decisions. I repeat once again, what do you mean by demand? Means desire for a commodity backed by purchasing power or ability to pay and willingness to pay that particular price. then only it becomes a demand. Let us assume there is a commodity A whose cost is 100 rupees. You have 200 rupees. You like to buy a product, but you don't want to buy this product at 100 rupees, but you are ready to buy at 80 rupees. You have ability to buy. You have willingness. You desire to buy, but you are not ready to buy at a given price, that is 100 rupees. You are ready to buy at 80 rupees. Then also it is not considered as demand at a given price if you are not ready to buy. You are having a desire for a commodity. You have a ability to buy, but at a given price you are not ready to buy means then also it is not considered as an effective demand. And you have to consider time. You are not ready to buy today or tomorrow. A particular time you are not ready. In future you may be ready to buy. Now you have ability. You are willing to buy, but not now. Some other after a year. Then also it won't considered as a demand. At a given period of time, are you ready to buy at a given price? Are you able to buy? That means you have sufficient income. All this together we call it as demand or effective demand in economics. You have to consider two things. That means you have to know two things with respect to quantity demand. Quantity demand is always expressed at a given price. At different prices, different quantities of commodity are generally demanded. That means as price changes, quantity demand also changes. So at a given price, you have to express at a given price what is the quantity that you are going to buy. You have to specify. If it is different prices, then the quantity demanded will varies. Quantity demand is a flow concept. It is a flow concept. You have to keep it in your mind. Because we are concerned not with a single isolated purchase, but with a continuous flow of purchase we must, and therefore we express demand as much per period of time. 1000 dozens of oranges per day. Even 1000 dozens of oranges per week and so on. So it will be like a flow concept. It will be keep on changing. The quantity demand will be varying. That is why this we call it as a flow concept. Now let us discuss determinants of demand. That means demand for X good is a function of price of that particular good and price of relative good, income of a consumer, taste and preference, advertisement, and so on, and so many factors. What do you mean by determinants of demand? All those factors which brings a change in demand, we call it as determinants of demand. Now let us discuss what determines the demand. The knowledge of a common determinants of demand for a product or service, the nature of relationship between demand and its determinants are essential for business firms for estimating the market demand for their product. So, what are the determinants and what type of relationship will exist between determinants of demand and demand for a product is very essential. The important factors that determine the demand are given below. The first one is price of a commodity. Obviously, the good's own price is a key determinant of its demand. Ceteris paribus, other things being equal, demand for a commodity is inversely related to its price, keeping all these other determinants constant. If price alone changes, if the price of the product increases, then the demand for that X product will decrease. If price of X product increases, demand for X product decreases. That means there is an inverse relationship between the price of a product and the quantity demand. It implies that rise in the price of a commodity brings about a fall in the quantity purchased and vice versa. This happens because of income and substitution effect. Dear students, we know demand for X is a function of its determinants. They are price of X good, price of relative goods, income of a consumer, taste and preference, advertisement, and so on. Already we discussed the relationship between demand for X good and price of that particular good. Now let us discuss demand for X good and price of relative good. So there are two types of relative goods. One is complementary goods, another one is substitute goods or competing goods. What do you mean by complementary goods? Complementary goods are those goods which are used together to satisfy particular want. What do you mean by substitute goods? Substitute goods are those goods which are used as an alternative to satisfy particular want. Here I have taken substitute goods as coffee and tea. When the price of tea increases, demand for tea decreases. So they have to find out an alternative one. So alternative one is coffee. So definitely demand for coffee increases. So there is no change in the price of coffee. But because of change in the price of tea, there is a change in demand for coffee. So this we call it as the effect of a change in the relative commodities price. We can observe here, when the price of tea increases, demand for coffee also increases. It means there is a positive relationship between demand for coffee and the price of a tea. So you can see the demand curve for substitutes are positively sloped, moving upward. As price of tea increases, demand for coffee also increases. Now let us discuss complementary goods. You can observe in this diagram, on x-axis I have taken petrol, on y-axis I have taken the price of car. Car is a main product and petrol is its complementary. Both car and petrol are equally important for better transportation. When the price of car decreases, definitely demand for car increases. When demand for car increases, definitely you need petrol, so demand for petrol also increases. You can observe the relationship between the price of complementary goods, price of the main good, and demand for its complementary. When the price of main good, that is car, decreases, demand for its complementary is going to increase. Observe in the diagram, when the price of car decreases, demand for petrol increases. It means that there is an inverse relationship between demand for a product and the price of a commodity. Dear students, now let us discuss demand for X good is a function of income of a consumer. Income of a consumer means here we will be considering disposable income. The income which is purely belong to consumer, so he can dispose that income. That means income here, disposable income is equal to consumption plus savings. Okay, we will be discussing this one. Okay, now let us start disposable income. See here, demand for X good is a function of income, I told. When income of a consumer increases, that means when income, disposable income increases, demand for goods also increases. When income of a consumer decreases, demand for commodity decreases. This we call it as income effect. That means when income increases, demand for a particular goods and services will increase. When income of a consumer decreases, demand for particular goods and services will decrease. But this always depends upon the nature of the good. So it always depends upon nature of the good. Quantity demand for a commodity and disposable income. This relationship will be understood by considering the nature of a commodity. There are two types of commodity. One is normal goods, another one is inferior goods. What are normal goods? Normal goods are those goods whose demand increases when income of a consumer increases. And what are inferior goods? Inferior goods are those goods whose demand increases when income increases up to a certain level. After this level, when income of a consumer increases, demand for inferior goods will decrease. So those goods we call it as inferior goods. I repeat once again, for few goods, demand increases when income increases up to a certain level. Later, when income increases, demand for those goods decreases. Such type of goods we call it as inferior goods. Dear students, here you can see normal goods. What do you mean by normal goods? Normal goods are those goods whose demand increases as income increases. There is a direct relationship between income and demand for normal goods. In the diagram you can see there is a positive slope of demand curve and demand for normal goods increases when income of a consumer increases. So demand curve is upward sloping. Next one is inferior goods. Inferior goods are those goods whose demand decreases when income of a consumer increases. So there is an inverse relation or negative relationship between income of a consumer and demand for inferior goods. When income of a consumer increases, demand for inferior goods decreases. So there is a negative slope. You can observe the demand curve slopes downwards. Dear students, as already we discussed, change in income of a consumer will cause changes. That means increase in income leads to increase in demand for necessaries. That is true, but both will not increase in a same proportion. So when income of a consumer increases 10% means demand for necessary goods also increases, but not 10%. It may be less than 10%. Less than 10% means it may be a 8% or it may be a 6%, like that. The proportion of increase in demand for normal goods will be less than the proportion of increase in income of a consumer. That you have to always keep in your mind. As people become richer and richer, the demand for food and other durables, non-durable goods will come down. But demand for durable goods such as TV, car, houses will start increasing. Especially demand for luxurious and prestigious goods rise behind a certain level of consumers' income and keep rising as income of a consumer. Dear students, next one is demand for X good is a function of the taste and preference of the buyer or consumer. Now let us discuss the taste and preference of buyers. The demand for a commodity also depends upon the taste and preference of the buyer. If taste and preference of buyer is unfavorable to that particular commodity, then demand for that commodity increases. If it is unfavorable, if we don't like that product, definitely demand for product will decrease. You can see here, dear students, the demonstration effect. You can see here the demonstration effect, bandwagon effect, Veblen effect, snob effect do play important role in determining the taste and preference of the consumer. You can see here demonstration effect is term coined by James Dusenberry, and even you can see bandwagon effect refers to the extent to which demand for commodity is increased due to the fact that others are also consuming the same commodity. If your neighbors, if your friends are using a particular branded mobile, then you do like to buy the same branded mobile. Or if anybody or any your close friends are buying a car, same branded car you like to buy, then that means your taste and preference is changed because of other person, because he is using, you want to use that the change or that effect we call it as bandwagon or demonstration effect. And you can see here snob effect. What do you mean by that? The extent to which demand for consumer goods is decreased owing to the fact that others are also consuming the same commodity. Sometimes you can observe few people, they don't want to buy that particular product because everybody is using. When everybody is commonly using that product, he wanted to be different from those people. So because of that reason, he don't want to buy that particular product. That we call it as snob effect. So the demand for commodity decreases because he is unfavorable. His taste and preference is unfavorable because so many people are using the same thing and he don't want to follow them, or he don't want to be the part of those group. So because of that reason, he reject or he don't want to buy that particular product. That effect we call it as snob effect. Then highly priced goods are consumed by status-seeking rich people to satisfy their needs for conspicuous consumption. They wanted to exhibit their richness. So because of that reason, as the price of commodity increases, the taste and preference for that commodity increases because it helps them to exhibit their status. So that effect we call it as Veblen effect. That one we call it as Veblen effect. Okay, it is named after American economist Thorstein Veblen. Dear students, next one is consumers' expectation. If consumers expect that in future prices will increase, so the demand, when they expect that the price of X good will increase in future, then now demand for X good will be increasing. See, this also, consumers' expectation also brings a change in demand for a commodity. And you can guess that income of a consumer. When consumer expects that his income is going to increase, definitely demand for few goods will increase. Even supply condition. If consumers expect that tomorrow the supply of vegetable will be less. If supply is less tomorrow, today itself there will be a greater demand for that particular commodity. So demand will increase. So this will have the influence on future demand. You can see here other factors also brings a change in the quantity demand. Size of population. As size of population increases, demand for goods and services also increases. Age distribution of population. If number of children are more, so there is a greater proportion of children, so the demand for books, demand for toys and all those items which are very essential for children will increase. If the age-old people are more in the country or in the population, the group of population, the age or what we can senior citizens are more, definitely demand for healthcare items, then demand for retirement homes will be more. So that is what I wanted to say here. Then the level of national income and its distribution. As GDP or national income increases, definitely demand for goods and services also increases. If income is distributed equally, only 10% of people are getting a major income of a national income means, then demand from those people will be very less, because whatever they want they already purchased. But 90% of people's income is very less, so the demand will be very less. If it is distributed equally, means everybody will buy goods and services. As it is equally distributed, demand for goods and services also increases. So these concepts you have to keep it in your mind. Then consumer credit facility and interest rate. If you charge very low rate of interest, so people will come forward to take a loan, and after taking a loan they will buy goods and services, so demand for goods and services will increase. So if the credit facilities are available easily and they are charging very less rate of interest, then it is beneficial. Government policies and regulations. Government influence the demand through its taxation. If government imposes more tax, the disposable income of a consumer decreases, so demand for goods and services also decreases. If government expenditure increases, then government is going to buy goods and services, so demand for goods and services will increase. If government gives subsidy, then the commodity will be available at a lower rate or cheaper rate, so demand for goods and services are going to increase. There are so many other factors like weather conditions, business conditions, stage of business cycle, wealth, levels of education, marital status, socio-economic class, group membership, habits of a consumer, socio-customs or social customs, and even conventions and salesmanship. Advertisement also plays very important role in influencing the quantity demand. Dear students, here you can observe demand function, that is the functional relationship between demand for a commodity and its determinants. Here you can see these are, we call it as determinants of demand, and quantity X, QX we call it as demand for X good, quantity demand for X good. In this you can see all these determinants we call it as independent variable, and the quantity demand we call it as dependent variable. So it expresses the relationship between dependent and independent variables. where Qx is the quantity demand of product X, Px is the price of the commodity, Y is the money income of the consumer, PR is the price of related goods, T is the taste and preference of the consumer. Now let us discuss law of demand. What law of demand states? Other things being equal, when the price of good rises, quantity demand of that good will fall. That means the demand for X good is a function of price of X good, price of relative good, taste and preference, income of a consumer, advertisement, and so on. When other things remaining constant and there is a change only in the price of X good. When the price of good rises, increases, demand for X good decreases. That means there will be a fall in the demand for X good. Thus, there is an inverse relationship, that means negative relationship between price and quantity demand. Ceteris paribus means other things which are assumed to be equal. What are those things which remains constant or assumed to be equal means the price of relative good, income of a consumer, that is Y, then taste and preference of the consumer, taste and preference of the consumer, then all factors other than price which brings such change in demand remains constant. Dear students, here you can observe demand schedule. What do you mean by demand schedule? It is a list of quantity demanded at different level of price. Or demand schedule shows list of quantity demanded by a consumer at different prices. So here demand schedule is a table, shows the quantities of goods that buyers would choose to purchase at different prices per unit of time with all other variables held constant. So it shows the relationship between price and quantity demand. You can see in the table or in the schedule the price per cup of ice cream in rupees it is given and the quantity of ice cream demanded. As price decreases, you can observe from point A to F, price is decreasing. First it was 60, then 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. Like this, price is decreasing and you can observe the quantity demand for ice cream is increasing. It means there is an inverse relationship between demand and the price of a product. Dear students, you can observe even in the diagram on x-axis the quantity of ice cream demanded is measured, on y-axis price per cup of ice cream is measured. You can see the demand curve which is flowing from left to right downwards. That indicates that if price is more, quantity demanded, you can see when price is 60, quantity demanded is 0. As price decreases, quantity demand is keep on increasing. When the price is 50, quantity demanded 2 cups of ice cream. When price fall to 10 rupees, quantity demanded will increase to 10 cups of ice cream. That indicates that when price of X good falls, demand for X good increases. That means there is an inverse relationship. So demand curve slopes from left to right downwards. Dear students, here you can see slope of demand curve is represented by minus delta P divided by delta Q. That means demand curve slopes from left to right downwards. So there is an inverse relationship between the price and quantity demand. So law of demand states there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demand is shown by minus sign. And we know that slope of demand curve or slope of any curve is measured by delta y divided by delta x. So delta y means that we have measured price. So delta p. On x-axis we measured quantity. So you can take it as delta q. And the negative sign is represents or will show the law of demand. Now what law of demand says? There is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demand. Demand curve need not be a linear or straight line. It can be a curvy linear. That means the proportion of change in price will not bring the same proportion of change in quantity demanded. So it can be a straight line or it can be a curvy linear. And change in quantity demand, if it is not constant, then it will be non-linear, and if it is a linear, then it is very convenient for analysis. Dear students, now let us discuss market demand curve. What do you mean by market demand curve? Market demand shows demand of all the consumers in the market at different level of prices. Let us discuss this with the help of a table. You can see in the table there are two consumers. Let us assume in the market there are only two consumers. We have the price of a ice cream at different levels. You can see the price of ice cream was 60 rupees, then 50, 40. So prices keep on decreasing. You can observe prices decreasing. And even demand by a consumer, that is a consumer, increases as price decreases. When price is 10 rupees, the quantity demanded is 10 cups of ice cream. When the price of product increases, you can observe demand for ice cream is decreasing. That means when it becomes 50 rupees, when it becomes a costlier, demand decreases. That means when he was able to buy 10 cups at 10 rupees, now he is buying only 2 cups at 50 rupees. In the similar manner, you can see consumer B. He is also having a same tendency, but the quantity differs. When price is very less, that is 10 rupees, he is buying 12 cups. As price increases from 10 rupees to 50 rupees, you can observe quantity demand will decrease from 12 to 4 cups. 12 cups to 4 cups. So if we add this demand, so the price at different prices, if demand of both the consumers, see at 60 rupees, what is the demand of a consumer is 0, but consumer B is 2 cups. So if we add, the total demand or market demand is equal to 2. When price falls to 20 rupees, the quantity demand of a consumer is 8 and quantity demand of ice cream by consumer B is 10. If we add these two, you will get a 18. So at 20 rupees, quantity demand increases from 2 to 18 as price falls from 60 to 20. When price is 10 rupees, the quantity demanded is 10 and by the consumer A and by consumer B is 12. If we add, it becomes a 12. So what is market demand? It is a total demand by all the consumers in the market at different level of price. We call it as market demand. Dear students, let us understand market demand with the help of diagram. Diagram A represents consumers A demand and B diagram represents consumer B. If we add A consumer and B consumers quantity demanded at different level of price, you will get a market demand. You can observe here market demand. You can observe here market demand. Right students, when the price of ice cream is 60, the quantity demand by A consumer is 0, but B consumer is 2. So definitely immediately you can observe the quantity demanded is 2. So the market demand is equal to B consumers quantity demand, as A consumers quantity demand is 0. When the price of ice cream falls from 60 to 10 rupees, the quantity demanded by consumer A is 10. Quantity demanded by consumer B is 12. So 10 plus 12 is nothing but a 22. 10 plus 12 is equal to 22. You can observe at 10 rupees market demand is 22. It indicates that market demand is an aggregate or total demand by all the consumers in the market at different level of price. When there is a straight line or straight line demand curve holding everything constant, it describes the demand function, linear demand function. So linear demand function can be written as Q equals A minus BP. A stands for vertical interception and B stands for slope of demand curve, that is delta P divided by delta Q, and minus stands for inverse relationship between the price and quantity demanded, and you know P stands for price and Q stands for quantity demanded. So this can be written, you can see this demand function can be written Q equals 100 minus 2P, or that can be rewritten as, let me take it, Q equals 100 minus 2P, and this can be written 2P equals 100, and when you take a Q towards the right side it becomes a minus, and when you take a 2P towards the left it becomes a plus. Minus becomes plus and plus becomes minus. You know the basic rules. So price is equal to 100 minus Q divided by 2, or this can be rewritten P equals 50. That means 100 divided by 2 is nothing but a 50. 50 minus Q divided by 2. Nothing is there means it is understood it is 1. So 1 divided by 2 you can rewrite like a P equals 50 minus 0.5 Q, 0.5 Q. Like this also you can write. So you can observe here, dear students, what I can say. So let me explain that. Here you can see Q equals 100 minus 2P can be written as 2P equals 100 minus Q, and P equals 100 minus Q divided by 2. And here P equals 50 minus 2. Rationale of law of demand. That means why does demand curve slopes downwards? That means why do people buy more at lower prices? Why demand curve slopes downwards? This is the question. So there are so many reasons, like the price effect of a fall in the price. That means demand curve slopes downwards. When the price of product falls, the quantity demand increases. That is why it has an inverse relationship. When price falls, quantity demand increases. This is one. Why it is so? So because of two reasons. One is substitution effect, another one is income effect. What is substitution effect? Let us discuss one after the other. Now let us discuss substitution effect, and it was given by Hicks and Allen, and they explained the law in terms of substitution and income effect. You can observe here the price of X good and quantity demand for X good is given. When the price of X good falls, of course demand for that product also increases, so demand curve slopes downwards. When the price of X good falls, the quantity demanded may be very less. But when there is a Y good which is a substitute for X good, and the price of Y good remains constant, Now the fall in price will make X good so cheaper, and instead of using a Y good, they may prefer to use X good as the price of this X good has come down. So quantity demand will increase more than increase in the quantity demand due to change in the price of X good. So this we call it as substitution effect by Hicks and Allen. You can observe change in, let me remove this one. You can see here, dear students, change in demand for product when its relative price changes. When the price of commodity falls, the price ratio between items change and it becomes relatively cheaper than the other commodity. That means a Y commodity, which is a substitute good for X commodity. Assuming that the price of other commodities remains constant, it indicates consumer to substitute commodities whose price has fallen for other commodity which have become a costlier when compared to the change in the commodity or the decrease in the price of commodity. The result is that total demand for commodity whose price has fallen will increase, and this effect we call it as substitution effect. So when the price of X good falls, compared to Y, because Y good price remains constant and the price of X good has fallen, demand for X of course increases, but when the price of X good falls and X good becomes relatively cheaper compared to Y good, then definitely instead of using Y, they will prefer to use X good, and demand for X good will increase further. That we call it as substitution effect. Substitution effect will be stronger when the good has a closer substitute. X and Y should be a closer substitute. The other thing is, while you are substituting from one good to another good, the cost of switching over should be less. That means lower cost of shifting from X good to Y good. Then you can take there should be a lower convenience. That means it should be very convenient while you are shifting from one substitute to another good. That means you take example of diesel and petrol will act as a substitute. But when the price of petrol remains constant and the price of diesel decreases, you cannot substitute. If you want to substitute from diesel to petrol, means you have to change the car. That means a diesel engine car you have to buy. Then the cost of switching will become very costly. In that time, the effect of substitution will be very less. So it should be convenient while you are shifting from one product to another product. Take example, the Y product is the price of Y product remains constant, but the price of X good will be decreasing. But it is available in North India and it is available in South India. To buy this product, even though price of this product has decreased, but to buy this product, if you go to North India, the cost of traveling becomes very costly. So it is not convenient to substitute. In that situation also, the effect of substitution will be very less. The substitution effect will become very stronger when there is a close substitute, correct? And the cost of switching from one product to other should be very easy, like changing from coffee to tea or tea to coffee. It is very easy and it will be available in the market. Whenever the price of these two goods increases or decreases, it will be easily substituted from one product to another. Next one is income effect. What is income effect means? Increase in demand due to increase in the real income, we call it as income effect. Let us understand this with the help of an example. If an income of a consumer is 100 rupees, the income of consumer is given, let us assume, and it is 100 rupees. And the price of a product is 25 rupees. Now he is able to buy 4 units. Even though he wanted to buy more units of a product, because price of a product is 25 and income is 100 rupees, so he is able to buy 4 units. By chance the price of a product falls to 20 rupees. Now the purchasing power of this 100 rupees increases from 4 units to 5 units, because when the price of product is 5, with 100 rupees he is able to buy 5 units. So with the same 100 rupees, previously it is able to buy 4 units, but now it is able to buy 5 units. It means that the real income or purchasing power of a consumer has been increased. And you should keep in your mind that a given product or commodity is a normal good. As a result of fall in the price of the commodity, consumers' real income or purchasing power increases. A part or whole of resulting increase in real income can be used to buy more of commodity in question, given that the good is normal. Whatever the real income increases, the whole income he may use to buy that particular product, or part of increased income can be used to buy a particular product according to his requirement. Therefore, the demand for the commodity will increase when the price falls. However, there is one exemption. What is the exemption? You can see here, in case of inferior good, income effect works in the opposite direction to substitution effect. So it works opposite to substitution effect. In the substitution effect, already you have seen, when the price of tea increases, demand for coffee increases. And people will try to substitute a cheaper product for costlier one. Instead of using costly one, they try to use the cheaper item. In case of inferior goods, if we refer, in case of inferior, the expansion in demand due to fall in price will take place only if substitution effect outweighs the income effect. If there is no substitutes, or substitution becomes very costly, or it is not so convenient, then demand for inferior goods will increase when the price of inferior goods falls. Next one is utility maximizing behavior of the consumer. So consumer always try to maximize his total utility. You want to maximize total utility. And according to Alfred Marshall, the marginal utility diminishes, that means decreases. So each additional unit will derive lesser and lesser unit of satisfaction. That we call it as law of diminishing marginal utility. What law of diminishing marginal utility says means, when a person goes on consuming a commodity one after the other without a time gap, the utility derived from each successive unit will be decreasing. As consumer try to consume more and more units of commodity, the utility from each additional unit of commodity will decrease. When it decreases or diminishes, he will be, that means consumer will be ready to pay lesser for each additional unit. And because of this reason, consumer is ready to buy less at a higher price and more at lower price. More quantity will give lesser satisfaction and less quantity will give higher satisfaction. When the quantity is very less, utility will be more, so he is ready to pay higher price. Now let us discuss. You can see here a rational consumer will pay more for lesser, will not pay more for lesser satisfaction, is induced to buy additional units only when the prices are lower. The operation of diminishing marginal utility and the act of consumer to equalize the utility of commodity with its price results in a downward sloping demand curve. So if you get a 10 units of utility, you are ready to pay 10 rupees. If you are able to get only 2 units of utility, then you will be ready to pay only 2 rupees. So this is what the consumer tried to bring the balance between the utility and what he is able to pay for the product. So because of this reason, he is ready to pay lower price when the utility is less, and the utility will be less when you consume more and more unit of commodity. Now let us discuss. Now let us discuss arrival of new consumer. What is this arrival of new consumers? Let us understand this with the help of an example. Let us assume that there are 10 consumers and 10 consumers, each consumer is having 200 rupees. Now if the price of a product is 210 rupees, then no one is able to buy this product. If the price of product falls from 210 to 180 rupees, now all these 10 members are able, the purchasing, previously they don't have purchasing power because they had only 200 rupees and the price of a product is 210. Now they have purchasing power because the price of product fell from 210 to 180. Now he is able to buy. So 10 more consumer will added to the group of those people who are consuming that particular commodity. So because of arrival of new consumer, demand for commodity increases as the price of commodity decreases. Next one is different uses. If a commodity has multiple uses, then when price increases, they will use for limited purpose. When price falls, then they use for more number of users. Therefore, when price falls, demand will increase. Take example of milk. When the price of milk is high, they use it for making buttermilk, tea, coffee, that's it. If the price of milk falls, then they use milk for making milk products and even sweets also they can make it. So they will use for many more purposes. So for that reason, when price falls, the demand for milk will increase and they use it for many more purposes. When price increases, they limit the use of that commodity. For example, electricity. Next, let us see exceptions to the law of demand. According to law of demand, other things remaining constant, more of commodity will be demanded at a lower price than at a higher price. That means there is an inverse relationship between the price of the product and the quantity demanded. The law of demand valid in the most cases. However, there are certain cases where this law does not hold good. Therefore, it is very important to discuss exemptions to the law of demand. Let us discuss important exemptions to the law of demand. Conspicuous goods. What are conspicuous goods? Means prestigious. Snob appeal or articles of conspicuous consumption are used by rich people, and they want to use that, they want to show off their status. So socially, or they want to exhibit their social status. Because of that reason, they are going to buy such type of goods whose prices are increasing, or high priced goods will be purchased by rich people to exhibit their wealthiness. So because of that reason, the law of demand will not hold in case of conspicuous goods or prestigious goods. Now let us discuss Giffen goods. What are Giffen goods? It is named after Sir Robert Giffen. He is a Scottish economist and statistician. Was surprised to find out that the price of bread increased. The British workers purchased more bread and not less of it. This was something against the law of demand. Why did this happen? The reasons given for this is that when the price of bread went up, it caused such a large decline in the purchasing power of poor people that they were forced to cut down the consumption of meat and other expensive food items. Since bread, even when its price was higher than the before, was still the cheapest food article compared to all those things, and people consumed more of it and not less when its price went up. In such goods, such goods which exhibits a direct price demand relationship are called Giffen goods. Generally, those goods which are inferior and no close substitutes available, then it occupies a substitutional place in the consumer's budget called Giffen goods. So inferior goods which does not have a close substitutes and the price and demand relationship is direct. If price increases, demand also increases. Then such type of goods we call it as Giffen goods. All goods are inferior goods, but remember, all inferior goods are not Giffen goods. Good example for Giffen goods are bajra, low quality rice, wheat, etc. Now, the conspicuous necessaries. What is this conspicuous necessaries means? The demonstration effect. So here people want to buy a few goods which they want to follow the pattern of the society. They will follow the consumption pattern of the society. Take example of smartphone. If everybody is using, so others will also buy that smartphone even if it is costlier. And it becomes very essential. There are so many items. Take example of refrigerator, television set, air conditioner. The prices of these items are increasing because as it become a necessary of life, and everyone following the consumption pattern of social group because of demonstration effect. When the prices are increasing, still there is no decline in demand for such type of goods. So this is also an exception to the law of demand. Next one is future expectation about the price. Let us assume that yesterday the price of a product is 10 rupees. Tomorrow it will become 12 rupees. And if consumer expect that day after tomorrow it will be a 14 rupees, then today the demand for good will increase. Even though yesterday it was 10, now it is 2, demand should decrease. but people are expecting that in future the price may increase. So because of that reason, today itself they are going to buy more goods and services. In the same manner, they can expect a fall in price. If the price of product is 10 rupees and tomorrow it becomes 8 rupees, if they expect that day after tomorrow it will be 4 rupees, even though there is a fall compared to yesterday, today there is a fall in the price, but people may not buy goods because they are expecting that in future the price may decrease further and it become a cheaper, so they postpone their purchase. So because of that reason, we can say that law of demand may not hold good. And you can observe here one thing. It's not mean that when we are talking about exemptions to the law of demand, it's not mean that law of demand is invalid. As we assumed all other factors remains constant and we proved law of demand, if other things changes means definitely there will be a change in the law of demand. Next one is incomplete information and irrational behavior. When we talk about the law of demand, we talk about the consumer who has a knowledge about market conditions and he should be a rational consumer. Who is a rational consumer? Who is able to calculate or bring the calculative relationship between price and usefulness of that particular commodity. We call him as a rational consumer. Because of lack of information regarding the market, or because he don't know how to utilize his income to maximize his satisfaction, in that situation the law of demand will not hold good. Okay, so here you can observe without calculating any rational calculations about the price and usefulness of that particular commodity, the law of demand may fail. Okay, households may demand large quantity of commodity even at a higher price because it may be ignorant of a ruling price of the commodity. So when we don't know what was the yesterday and the previous day the prices of that commodity, today how can you compare and decide how much you need to buy? So in that situation also the law of demand may not hold good. Next one is demand for necessaries. So demand for necessaries, the law of demand does not applicable or holds good. Take example of salt. When the price of salt falls, you cannot buy more quantity. You have to consume only required quantity only. So in that situation, you never bother about the price of the product, but you have to buy a quantity, that required quantity you have to buy, and it is applicable only for necessaries. So law does not hold good in case of necessaries, as they have to consume a minimum quantity of that particular commodity, whatever may be the price. Even if price is less, they won't buy more. Even when price is more, they can't buy less quantity, as it will be very essential. And even in case of speculative goods. What are speculative goods? That is shares, bonds, such type of things we call it as speculative goods. So you can observe in the share market, when the prices of stocks and shares increases, demand for such goods also rises. When the price of these shares and stocks decreases, the tendency is towards falling or declining, then demand will be very less for such type of stocks and shares.
Dear students, let us discuss an interesting and important concept, the movement along the demand curve. As we all know that demand for X good is a function of price of X good, price of relative good, income of the consumer, and taste and preference of the consumer. keeping all other things remaining constant, that is price of relative good, income and taste and preference of the consumer. Any change in the price leads to change in quantity demand. This we call it as demand function. Demand function can be expressed. Demand for X good is a function of price of X good. So there will be a functional relationship between price of a good and demand for that particular good. As I told, demand function is a relationship between quantity of the good and its price when other things remaining constant. Here price of relative good, income of the consumer and taste and preference of the consumer keeping constant. If price changes, demand for that particular product also changes. So demand curve is a graphical representation of demand function. When you bring a graphical relationship between demand for a good and price of its good, then we call it as demand curve. Any change in price leads to movement along the demand curve, assuming that other things remaining constant. This is also known as ceteris paribus in economics. It means that other things being equal, other things being same or other things remaining constant, we call it as ceteris paribus. Dear students, let us understand movement along the demand curve with the help of a diagram. You can see in the diagram on x-axis quantity demanded and on y-axis price is measured. You can see two arrow mark, one arrow mark moving upward, another one is downward. If demand curve moves up or down, this we call it as movement along the demand curve. Let us assume the price of product is P and the quantity demanded at price P is Q. If price of a product increases, then the quantity demanded will decrease from Q to Q2. This leads to movement of demand curve upwards. This we call it as situation of contraction of demand. If price decreases from P to P1, the quantity demanded will increases. Then demand curve moves downwards. This movement we call it as extension of demand. So, movement along the demand curve refers to extension or contraction of demand. Dear students, let us discuss shift in demand. As already we discussed, there are different determinants of demand. Demand for X is a function of price of X, price of relative good, income of the consumer, taste and preference of the consumer. Other things remaining constant, if price changes, leads to movement along the demand curve. If you keep price constant and any one of its determinant changes, then that leads to shift in demand. So what I want to say here, except price, any change in one of the other determinants of demand leads to shift in demand curve. So what are the other determinants of demand? Price of relative good, income of the consumer, taste and preference of the consumer. Keeping other things remaining constant, any one of the determinants are going to change, then leads to shift in demand. There are two types of shifts in demand. The first one is increase in demand, second one is decrease in demand. Dear students, now let us discuss increase in demand. So if other determinants of demand changes, there will be a shift in demand. Let us discuss one after the other which causes increase in demand. That means demand curve will shift towards the right side. Let us assume that income of the consumer is going to change. Here we have taken demand for X good as a normal goods. When income of the consumer increases, the quantity demand for normal goods also increases. So, demand curve will shift towards the right side. Now, just consider the price of relative good. Here I have taken a substitute goods. If the price of substitute goods, the good example are coffee and tea. Here I am going to consider the price of tea increases, then tea becomes costlier. So, then definitely demand for coffee increases, which leads to increase in demand. So, demand curve will shift from DD to D2, D2. Now, let us consider the taste and preference of the consumer. If the taste and preference of the consumer is in favor, then demand for X good increases. So, demand curve will shift towards the right side. So, this we call it as increase in demand. Dear students, let us discuss decrease in demand. So, as already we discussed increase in demand. Now, let us discuss what are the reasons or when demand curve will shift towards the left side. The first one is income of the consumer. Demand for normal goods decreases when income of consumer decreases. So, when income of consumer decreases, demand for normal goods decreases. So, demand curve will shift towards the left side. Consider price of relative goods. Here we have taken a substitute. So, if we consider price of tea and the price of tea decreases, demand for coffee decreases. So, demand curve will shift towards the left side. Now, consider taste and preference of the consumer. When the taste and preference of the consumer is not in favor, then demand for that particular good decreases. So, demand curve will shift towards the left side. This we call it as decrease in demand.
Dear students, we discussed a movement along the demand curve and shift in demand curve. It is very important for all businessmen and decision maker to understand the difference between movement along the demand curve and shift in demand curve. Movement along the demand curve indicates changes in the quantity demand because of change in price alone, and shift in demand curve indicates change in demand at each possible price because one or more other factors such as income, taste and preference, price of some other goods have been changed. Thus, when an economist speaks about increase or decrease in demand, it refers to shift in demand. When economists speak about change in quantity demand, it means the movement along the demand curve, where we will discuss expansion and contraction of demand due to fall or rise in the price of a commodity. Dear students, if you like, please like, share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much.